Welcome to the Whole Health Podcast,
where a functional nutritionist and a biological dentist investigate the interconnectedness of your health.
Let's get started. Welcome back to the Whole Health Podcast. And today I'm thrilled to introduce Andrea McBeth. I'm going to give a little bit of background because, it's just so unique and fascinating, and I'm so excited to share this with people. Okay, so Andrea is a human ecosystem activist, entrepreneur, and naturopathic clinician who has been teaching and innovating in the microbiome space since 2015. Andrea earned her bachelor's in biochemistry from University of San Diego and her doctorate in naturopathic medicine from National University of Natural Medicine, NUNM, here in Portland, Oregon. She served as the president of the Gastroenterology Association of Naturopathic Physicians from 2017 to 2023. Now, she's also the founder and CEO of Thaena, which we're going to really dive into today. She developed a breakthrough fecal-derived postbiotic platform. Okay, just sit with that for a second. I'm going to repeat it. A breakthrough fecal-derived postbiotic platform that leads the company's scientific, strategic, and fundraising efforts. Andrea's career spans cancer research, environmental biochemistry, naturopathic clinical care, entrepreneurship, and adjunct faculty roles, always with a focus on reducing human suffering by bridging conventional medicine with functional nutrition and environmental health. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you.
What a bio.
I know. I was like, wow, I don't even know where that came from, but
Who is this person?
Sounds fun.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So we have so much to talk about today, but you better explain to us before we dive in what fecal-derived postbiotic platform means.
Yeah, I know. I was laughing. I was like, the lady walks in and she's from the poop company.
Yeah.
That's who I am.
Yes.
Really.
Tell us about your poop pills, Andrea.
So they are inspired by fecal transplant. So that's sometimes a helpful place to start. If your listeners have heard of fecal transplant, it's been around for forever, veterinary medicine, fourth Chinese literature, but it was reintroduced to the U.S. in 2008. And it really is just healthy human poop from a relative often. You bring it to the hospital, and then they deliver it to a recipient who has an antibiotic-resistant pathogen called C. diff. There's other things people use it for, and you deliver it to the colon of a recipient. And it's really that. And then the work we do was inspired by that, and it's healthy human donor stool, but that's been sterilized. And we focused on extracting and supporting just the postbiotics that come from a healthy ecosystem. I can explain a little bit different in that we use the humans as our fermenters of yogurt, right? Instead of being yogurt from a culture that we make a postbiotic from. We have healthy human ecosystems, healthy people, be the kombucha. So, if that is helpful.
That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I feel like if our listeners are thinking to themselves right now, I've heard of a prebiotic, maybe,
yeah,
probably, and I've heard of a probiotic. Can you explain what a postbiotic is?
Yeah, and I think it helps to put them together, right? Prebiotic is the food we feed the bugs in our gut, microbes. Probiotics, the probiotics in our gut or that we eat from a supplement or that was cultured in yogurt or on sauerkraut, those bugs then eat the prebiotic and they make a postbiotic. And the postbiotic is the small molecule that the microbes make within our GI tract or on our skin or, in this whole organ system that's in and on us. And that is actually the small molecule, the little signal that actually gets over the mucus layer into our human cells and binds a receptor and talks to us. And so I think of the postbiotics as the language of the microbiome. So it's how the microbes speak to us as human cells.
Okay, so I've been explaining this to patients like postbiotics are the poop of your own microbes.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
Yes? Okay, we're going to go with that. And that poop or that excrement can communicate throughout our body. And we think of this largely as a positive thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's super important. The microbiome is so fun. And I think that's where you and I met. And I don't know how much you love the microbiome, but I'm assuming you love it too.
I'm growing more,
More fond
excited
of it every
about
day.
it by the moment here.
And, to be honest, my favorite is the oral microbiome as a teaser.
Yes.
But the microbes are taking our food and converting it into these postbiotic molecules, metabolizing it, converting it, pooping it, whatever you want to, but they take a precursor and they change it. And they're an organ that we've been co-evolving with since the beginning of time. And so those molecules are nutrients, vitamin B, vitamin K, neurotransmitters, immune modulators, metabolic modulators, things that impact our mitochondria and how we age. And I am starting to think about the microbiome as this organ that has scurvy or is causing like scurvy of the modern era, in a sense that we, like the pirates of old on the ships not getting vitamin C, have depended on these microbes making these nutrients for us forever. And with this shift towards a depleted microbiome, these little postbiotic molecules are probably just like vitamin C, core nutrients to us functioning as healthy whole systems. And it's wild to start to have these conversations now with nutrition and oral microbiome and think about chronic disease, because we don't even know what these postbiotics are. There's like 14,000 in our product, and we know the names of a fraction of those.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talk about short chain fatty acids, and then that's the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
Good night. That's all we have. So you're saying how many postbiotics are in your...
So we have like 14,000 unique peaks, right? And some of them are isomers of them, but tens of thousands of small molecules and many versions of a bile acid, many versions of short-chain fatty acids, dipeptides. Like, we think about how excited we are about BP157 in the longevity space and other things, but there's peptides in our gut too. Microbes have been making these molecules since, again, the beginning of time, since we've been co-evolving with them. So we're at the beginning of a really cool era. Like, I love the science of being in the new frontier. And I really feel like that's how the microbiome is for us.
Absolutely.
And postbiotics in particular.
And yeah.
I'm wondering if it is this new frontier somewhat of a revisiting of what used to be the old frontier before people's microbiomes got toasted by, you fill me in.
Yeah. And I think, so when I left cancer research and became a naturopath, I had a really hard time with like this cognitive shift from cellular molecular biology to Chinese medicine and nutrition and sort of the things that I didn't have a mechanism to explain. And the microbiome is that mechanism, to be honest. It's the bridge between the things we've been doing for centuries and why they logically make sense, and why we couldn't connect them to our human physiology mechanistically, because the microbes are such a unique organ system we couldn't see. So we've always looked at miasmas or, our importance of nutrition or the importance of mental health and what we eat and drink and think and how our teeth are healthy or not as part of health. We just didn't understand why. And since I started studying the microbiome and getting excited in school because I wanted to kind of explain what was happening, nutrition has fundamentally changed. Dentistry has fundamentally changed. And even neurobiology and our appreciation that the gut is actually connected to the brain and our immune system and our metabolism. But we've known it's explaining a lot of things we've always known. It's just giving the mechanistic bridge to those things, I think. Obviously, I have a bias and I'm highly enthusiastic about the microbes.
It's so fascinating. And I think I run a lot of microbiome tests, right? And then you get this report back and you're like, great, I'm seeing a sampling of some microbes that were found. And I think largely, at least people in functional medicine understand we haven't mapped the whole microbiome. We don't understand everything that's there or could be there. But I'm starting to understand, and the more I've learned from you, really it's not maybe about the microbes as much as it is about the postbiotics or those molecules that are secreted, released, whatever, from the microbiome itself.
Yeah, and I like to frame it as if you had a kindergarten classroom and you were interested in what was going to happen to that classroom. You don't care whether the names of the kids are Joe and Susie and Billy. You care whether they just had Halloween candy and they're about to rip the walls off, or they're in nap time. And so behavior is a much more important dictator of the impact on the environment. And I think for microbes, the revolution and evolution that's happened since genomic sequencing was available in the 2000s, right? Like, we're talking about an organ system that we couldn't see, that we discovered with whole genome sequencing in 2006 or 2008. And to name them was great, but it largely missed the context of what their behavior was, what their postbiotics were, what their impact on the environment around them was. And so I think what we're seeing now in the last couple years is just the next evolution of discovery, of appreciating. It's one thing to know their names, but that still doesn't, it can kind of tell them if they're a jerk or not, sure, but it doesn't give us the context of what they're actually doing in the gut microbiome, because my Susie and Billy may fundamentally have different behaviors than yours because our environments are different, and the food we're feeding them is different, and the environmental signals we're sending them are much different. And so I think we're just unpeeling another layer of this onion to appreciate a better context to think about how they're impacting us individually. And personalized medicine, I think, is a big part of us appreciating the microbiome, because it doesn't fit very well in some of the other systems we have. Because again, their behavior is going to be different depending on their environment.
You're a human ecosystem activist. I love that so much. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, especially in the context of what does it mean when you're thinking about your own health? What does it mean to cultivate an ecosystem?
Well, it's a lot less depressing than being in climate science.
Okay.
I'll tell you that right now, because we have a lot. There is a real, mass extinction event happening that we didn't know was happening in a micro level in our guts, in the same way we're seeing on a macro level from climate change.
Okay.
But I think the reason I gravitated away from environmental science towards nutrition in particular is because we have a lot of power to impact it and change. And even though you may have been in an environment that left you at a fraction of the diversity of our ancestors. So, traditionally you think about humans evolved for millennia eating 100 grams of fiber a day and not having a lot of the components of hygiene that we have. So it makes total sense that in the last 100, 150 years, we're at 20 to 40% of the diversity on a good day of our ancestors. And the average American eats 6 grams of fiber from 100. I try to eat 20 to 40, but man, is it difficult to get protein and fiber, and all the
You're
things.
Just full all the time.
Yeah.
40 grams of fiber is a lot.
And, I was born into a circumstance of a C-section and antibiotics and all the components that we don't necessarily have control over and can keep us alive, which is great. But it has led to this mass extinction event. And I think when we look at our individual microbiomes through an ecology lens, or the same kind of paradigm that we think about ecosystem restoration, it's really empowering because we can do a lot about it. It helps me make a decision of a cost benefit on a daily basis for my personal health in a way that I think wellness throws out these 100 things you should do. Mm-hmm. But if you're thinking about your own individual microbiome, you can start to make cost benefit decisions about what you spend money on for food. Do you go to get a massage? Do you prioritize sleep? Do you buy a water filter? Do you go do your dentistry to help the long-term, you think the oral microbiome is the beginning of the microbiome that seeds the gut. And then all of a sudden you can make these cost benefit decisions I'm not going to microwave plastic, but I am going to go eat takeout sometimes because I'm going to live my life.
Right.
So I think of it as a ecosystem activist in the sense that we need to name that the mass extinction event has happened, understand the repercussions of that, and then approach it from an ecological rehabilitation, and also just to help us have some sanity in this world of how do I prioritize these 200 things I'm supposed to do, and what is the best way for me to balance my resources in the same way we look at larger systems of finite resources, which is the reality of what we all have going on. I don't know if that was too philosophical.
No. No, I think it's great. You go, because I can tell you're brewing a question.
Well, I just want to gain clarity because you guys are talking about a world that I don't, that's not my day to day.
You don't think about poop all day?
Or the microbes in your mouth.
Microbes in your mouth?
Certainly, yes. But as you know, like what we were talking about with Dr. Schroeder today,
Yeah.
a lot of energetics and, it's all important. But just so that I'm clear, when you say like a mass extinction event, is what you're saying that the overall diversity of microbes from one end to the other,
Yep.
and maybe even on our skin as
Yes,
well, right?
100%.
Has diminished considerably.
Yeah, we've lost it. Like, we've lost so much diversity that when we started to sequence the microbiome, they were looking for good guys and bad guys. But the reality was the only thing that unified like all disease was that all disease were associated with more loss of diversity, because in the gut microbiome in particular. But like, even on our skin, there's research that's been done with the Yanomami tribe and the Amazon, and there's an entire layer of skin microbiome that they have that we just don't even have. And they lose it as soon as they go take a shower and leave the jungle. And like, that is an organ system of skin microbiome that we literally just didn't even know existed until some scientists went and did the sequencing to look at it. And the same thing in our gut microbiome, like, they've found some poop petrified from people like from hundreds of years ago, and they're starting to sequence it. And there's species that we didn't even know existed, in the same way that there's mass extinction on like insects and global. We're just starting to unravel what we've lost. The cool part is we're pretty adaptive. So even though we've lost huge components of this diversity, it's an organ that evolves on like a 24 to 36 hour time period. And so I think a lot of the reasons we're able to survive the world we are, that's so fundamentally different from what it was 150 years ago in particular, is because the microbes are adapting with us. And so I don't want to make it all doomsday. I think there is like a lot more hope and optimism when you're thinking about ecosystem activism on this micro level.
So when we're thinking about supporting the microbiome, there's ways that we can support the microbes that are in our gut right now. And I want to get your input on that. And then I want to talk about how Thaena, or how postbiotics, what can they do? What is their potency? So start with, how do we support and how do we maybe facilitate a healthier ecosystem for what we're left with right now? Yeah.
So you want to keep what you got, right, at a baseline. Wherever you are in life or wherever you're doing, being a steward of a healthy ecosystem of your own microbiome is important. Sometimes we do need to take antibiotics. And so I never advocate for people to forego life-saving medication in particular. But if you're in a circumstance where there's a choice, like a viral infection, right, for example, antibiotics maybe aren't the best choice. Or if there's ways to mitigate the harm that would come from a round of antibiotics by making sure you're eating a lot of fiber going into it, and you have like a really robust ecosystem that gets knocked down a little bit but maybe can recover after. A good model system to think about is like, you have this diversity, and then you have a perturbation that comes in and knocks things down a little bit, but then can it return to homeostasis? And every time you take a hit, you lose some capacity. And so you just are trying to restore and then live your life, and then restore and live your life. And nutrition is fundamentally one of the most important places to protect your microbiome, and then avoiding the things that kill microbes overtly, preservatives, pesticides, things in water and air. But there's to some extent that you can't avoid everything. So you want to make that cost benefit decision as you go, of like nurturing and supporting and avoiding things that are overtly harmful. And then we can't like disconnect it from our brain, which is really good at knocking down our microbiome when we're in a fight or flight mode too.
Okay.
And so not to separate it from the stress component, because often I think sleep and stress and lifestyle get ignored, but they're a huge contributor to our ecosystem resiliency. Because if you're going to have limited resources because you got to go run away from a bear or whatever, you're not going to be protecting your microbiome and nurturing it the same way. The same way your nervous system has rest and digest and fight or flight.
Okay. So postbiotics.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk about.
I know. It's like, and the Thaena. Yeah.
And then the Thaena. I know. I have a really hard time ever talking about my own product because I'm like, because there's so many other things that contribute. But this is such a novel option for people, right? And I can see that people might get lost in the novelty of it, of like, well, okay, but what does it do? What can it do? So talk us through like what would we use this for, and what is it doing in the body?
Yeah, and so I think the precursor conversation we just had is helpful, right?
Yeah.
So we all have different components of loss, of extinction, and I'm just not going to be able to make some postbiotics, period. Because I don't have the microbes to do that. At least we think, right? And so one of the things our product does is it takes a snapshot of the postbiotics in the ecosystem from a vaginally born, breastfed, healthy 35-year-old who eats organic, has never been sick in his life.
Unicorns.
Meditates, exercises, doesn't, do the things that sometimes I do. Like go out, eat pizza and drink beer and smoke a cigarette, or like whatever, all the sins of my microbiome restoration. And so what we think a component of, and we're the first people to autoclave fecal transplant or healthy stool or anything along this line. So
break down what that means for people.
Autoclave is like Instapot.
Okay.
Like literally
you're killing the alive stuff.
We're sterilizing, i.e. heat killing in a pressure cooker.
Okay.
All of the live bacteria and viruses.
Okay.
So that what is left is just safe, i.e. not infectious, small molecules. And then we freeze dry, we do some chemistry, and then, what you're left with is a really interesting mix of short chain fatty acids and bile acids and tryptophan derivatives and stuff like that.
Okay.
But again, those are coming from a healthy donor person's poop. So it represents their ecosystem that we, at least in theory, think has more nutrients. It's like a multivitamin that I can't make. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
In theory. And that's part of why we think we see people take this and feel better in like 24, 48 hours. And what I mean by feel better is like their GI feels a little better, their brain feels a little better. We're in early days of thinking about clinical trials and mechanism overtly, but it seems like the more sad your microbiome is, the more this seems to help.
Makes sense.
Which makes sense, I think, from this perspective of disparity between diversity, healthy, all the nutrients to whatever it is that I'm doing with my life, or whatever all of us are.
The more deficient you are in making these postbiotics on your own, the more meaningful replacement would feel.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Sometimes it's transient. So it's just like, I just, took one of those big stressing hits, whether that's, brain stress or travel stress or food I ate or whatever. And that means I'm knocked down, and this is just going to come in and kind of be nutrients to help me rebuild and be resilient. It's not going to replace the microbes, but we're a pretty adaptive system if you give it the nutrients it needs.
So I got to ask, who's the person out there for whom Thaena is an appropriate solution? Like, paint me a picture of that human being.
Man, would I love to know the answer to that. I think what we found, so we've been using this, I was a naturopath doing functional kind of GI, right? And so this evolved out of work where I just wanted to help people who had IBS, like SIBO, or, trouble with diarrhea or constipation, right? Or like kind of not overtly sick, but just couldn't eat some foods, weren't resilient to the world, went to Mexico 3 years ago and got traveler's diarrhea and just like have never been the same. And so that's who I started working with. And I have to say, this is a great tool for that. We have gone down many rabbit holes now that we've been doing this since 2020, like 2019. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at the microbiome and these nutrient postbiotics that they're making in lots of other diseases. And the parallel we have to draw from is work that's been done in fecal transplant. It's not exactly the same, but when fecal transplant was introduced back into the US and used for C. diff, which is an opportunistic infection, there's been a bunch of clinical trials done in everything from Parkinson's and autism to helping people have less side effects to cancer treatments. I mean, the thing that fecal transplant did was fundamentally challenge our appreciation and understanding of the role of the microbiome. Because if you had asked a neurologist before 2008 if the gut had anything to do with anything neuro, they would be like, that is ridiculous. And now we have mouse studies that show fecal transplant can directly impact depression and anxiety and neurocognitive behavior. And so I think there is just like a broader appreciation that the gut kind of interacts with everything, and we don't know all the details yet. But if you aren't pooping a healthy Bristol 4 poop every morning, you probably have some room for improvement or more than one, you know? And I think that's where the reality is we don't know all of the causative or correlative, but I talk to people who are like, what about for longevity and biohacking? I'm like, great. What about for traveling? Great. It's not going to replace like conventional medicine treatments for diseases, but I do think it's a good tool in the toolbox. And the more we learn, maybe more development will come kind of at knowing more nuance of like which pieces are missing in which places. But we're a long ways from knowing that, I think.
So when you're thinking about those postbiotics, though, because I know we have research on the specific molecules, like we have, you know, the most basic, we have research on short chain fatty acids, right? The one we actually measure. What are the things that we know some of these postbiotics do when they're plentiful?
Yeah. Butyrate is super important. It's a short chain fatty acid that is both, it does a bunch of cool things, right? So it's both an energy source for healthy cells that line our gut, but it can also do what's called it's HDAC inhibitor. So it can like stop cancer cells from developing, and it's anti-inflammatory when it gets into the bloodstream. It can bind receptors that impact our immune system. There's kind of this big unlock that's happening right now, looking at things like tryptophan derivatives and bile acids and short-chain fatty acids that we used to think only lived in the gut and that's all they did. But now we're looking at them even in small amounts in the blood can impact peripheral tissue, which like kind of makes sense when you think about like physiology, but it wasn't something anybody was looking for until a couple years ago. And so now we're looking at, well, like, how does your gut and your brain, leaky gut, leaky brain connection happen? And what does that mean for these small molecules in your periphery? And I mean, there's even neuronal cells recently that were shown to be connecting directly between your gut and your pancreas and the islet cells in your pancreas. And so I think there's a systemic and then there's a local health component, and they're both important. And, you know, I think the gut and the microbiome writ large through the entirety of our skin and tube, right, is all important to the broader health of the organ, us as an organism. A holobiont is like one of my favorite words.
Yeah.
Where it's just like a big mixture of lots of things.
We are like a garbage dump. So I'm imagining a savvy listener thinking, because I'm thinking, so leaky gut. I mean, we talk about it all the time in the TikToks and the Instas of the world, right? Do I have a leaky gut, right? Which is really intestinal permeability, which is really damage to the intestinal tissue, which is a long-term issue because the things within the gut can move into the bloodstream without a security guard or a boundary, right?
Well, what's interesting is like some of the new research. So you think about leaky gut as bad and chronic inflammation long term, but like one of the reasons exercise is good for us, or at least they think, is because it transiently causes leaky gut. And you actually get more benefit from like eating vegetables or polyphenols before you exercise, because exercising makes your gut leaky.
Yes.
And then you get more of those polyphenols into your
No.
So I think there's nuance to everything.
Okay, that's very fascinating.
Yeah, and
that's new
find
information
that study
for me.
for you.
Okay, thank you.
But I think, like everything, there was a physiologic reason for our microbiome to get leaky and then come back together. The problem is, just like if you had a cut on your arm, if it doesn't heal or repair or find that homeostasis again, you get a chronic low-grade inflammatory signal that has long-term, problems for your brain or your metabolic health or whatever. And I think we're just like, we have to keep the ecosystem balanced, but not that we never want leaky gut. It's just that we don't want it all the time. Right?
Yes.
Probably.
Okay, that's I'm not saying right because this is new information for me. So that I understood, and I actually was just reviewing the gut test for an NBA player that I work with, along with his antibody levels. And I was like, dude, you're so interesting because I know you train 6 hours a day and you are breaking your big body down and you have no signs of intestinal permeability whatsoever. Not one test picks it up. We're like 99% of people I test, they have some signs of, antibody activity at least. And I couldn't make sense of that. Like, how do you work your body that hard when we know that that level of training causes intestinal permeability, but it sounds like it may be a resilience issue where it's not causing an immune reaction. It's just the natural ebbing and flowing. Okay. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I'm going to take from this.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm going to reassure him. He's going to be so excited. It's totally natural. But so when we're thinking about postbiotics and we're thinking about intestinal permeability in more of the inflammatory way, where we're seeing
you can't break the cycle.
And we're like, okay, maybe we're worried about other barriers in the body. Leaky mouth, we think about a lot. Are these postbiotics potentially tools for healing that tissue and bringing that intestinal permeability around?
The other place we've done some really interesting work is looking at oxidative stress. And so just like other parts of our body, oxidative stress happens when we make energy in the mitochondria, and that's important, but you need to be able to sequester up all the, you don't want electrons rolling around making damage. So in the gut, what's really interesting is you have all these microbes, and again, I maybe going to go down a little bit of a diatribe, but like our gut microbes aren't made for oxygen, right? They're anaerobic.
Yes. And
they do this very slow they're like extremophiles. They're like the microbes at the bottom of the ocean on like the vents of the volcanoes. They're very special and they're very delicate. The ones that make short chain fatty acids.
They're anaerobic.
They're anaerobic.
Is that all the way down the intestinal tract, small intestine and large, or mostly in the colon?
It's a graph. And so like it starts with more oxygen and gets less and less until you get to the end of the colon.
And this is why this is so important when that shifts.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you can get a system where you have constipation, for example, and you get a piece of food fermenting and it kicks up this response where you actually recruit oxygen into that little area.
Yes.
And then the microbes shift and you lose the ones that make short chain fatty acids and you shift to facultative aerobic bacteria or different kinds of metabolism.
Because that environment now is like, hey, bring all the aerobic bacteria. We are now aerobic. We like oxygen.
They're facultative, right?
Okay,
meaning
they're there.
Like they can shift. It's a very dynamic system.
Crazy.
And the problem is if you lose and there's too much oxidative stress, right? They're shifting their metabolism. Microbes can turn on and off genes all the time. Just like the kindergartners, they can decide to rip the things off the walls or they can be chill.
Yeah, okay.
And what we think is happening with both the postbiotics and just polyphenols in general and some of the nutrition stuff that we know is really important is that it's helping you get out of that aerobic, pro-oxidant, leaky gut, inflammatory environment and shift back to anaerobic metabolism of short-chain fatty acids.
Okay, because I've long wondered, how do you make that shift back to an anaerobic environment? It keeps me up at night.
Blueberry powder and poop.
Oh,
Yeah, maybe.
great.
Sorry.
So the postbiotics can help with that shift back to the right level of oxygen for the different places and the health of the intestinal barrier.
Yeah, and the dysbiosis through the leaky gut and dysbiosis through the lens of oxidative stress is kind of a new theory. There's some researchers at UC Irvine that have looked at it, but it like adds another layer of that onion of understanding metabolically, why is it that the basketball player can be exercising and is fine and can recover, but like, you know, the average American who barely ever does high intensity workout, you know, struggles.
Yep.
Or why chronic dental caries. I mean, I don't know. I was like so excited about this podcast in part because I was like, by the end of this, I want you to believe we're going to have poop toothpaste by the end of the year.
I've tasted some that do taste poopy.
Yeah. But, you know, it's like one of those things where everything feeding in is going to impact that metabolic behavior.
Okay, so that makes sense to me. Now you two are going to have to put puzzle pieces together for me in this vein, because I feel like when I learned about dental caries from Dr. Cooch, we were talking about kind of the acid from certain microbes that change the pH. Am I on track so far? Okay, I thought it. Okay, all right. So if we're thinking about that as a byproduct of what the microbes are putting out,
It's their postbiotics.
It's their
Our oral
postbiotics.
postbiotics
It's their
are so
postbiotics.
important.
it's their postbiotics.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we rebrand it from poop paste?
If we're going to put it in our mouth. Yeah. It's a really good idea.
I like did a bunch of research getting ready for this podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hope that by the end of this interview, they're as excited as I am about postbiotic toothpaste.
Well, now I'm really excited about it because actually when Kelly and I are working with patients that have these chronic cavities or like the loss of enamel, and there's certain things like boxes I can check. I can go and be like, do you have celiac? Do you have vitamin D deficiency? Do you have malabsorption for other reasons that aren't those things? You know, what are we looking at? Why is this breaking down? But I actually hadn't thought about it from that perspective of it not necessarily being some frank infection of the mouth or one microbe in the mouth, but the actual
Loss of diversity
in postbiotics,
Yeah.
which could be from birth.
Yeah.
Because it could be just what you got coming in from your mother or, you know, multiple generations, right?
Yeah.
So even though I'm seeing oral probiotics hit the market now, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing that. And I don't know what we have for research on how well those work, but postbiotics are really what we're talking about with regards to the environment that those teeth are living in.
Yeah,
for
and if
all
you-
the tissue.
I mean, if you have the right prebiotics, there's some really cool oral prebiotics that impact allergies, right? There's a group called Allerpop. I don't know if you've seen that. Scientists made it. It's fascinating. It helps with kids' like food and seasonal allergies. And all it is a prebiotic for oral microbiome good guys. And it has a downstream effect on the immune system.
Wow.
And if you have the right precursor, I don't know a ton about the oral microbiome other than it's a microbiome just like the other ones, but like there are good guys that keep us from getting gum disease, right? Yeah. And it's just like in the same way that we used to think we needed to kill everything, we actually probably need to cultivate the native species that are good because their postbiotics are a lot of what kind of that same theory of oxidative dysbiosis in the colon and having the right metabolism of the right microbes is probably true in the mouth and how you end up with gum disease.
It's interesting because the dentist we're talking about, Kim Cooch, developed a product that changes the pH of the mouth. Well, that makes sense now to me from the microbiome perspective is if you're going to change the pH, you've changed the environment. Changing the environment changes what thrives.
And what they can metabolize. Yeah. And if you can couple that with a prebiotic and some postbiotics, if you're missing those, you probably will have a net benefit as opposed to a chlorhexidine, mouthwash.
Right.
Yeah.
It is so fascinating. I could talk about this all
So for the practical guy in me, you know, like I take it on your website, you can purchase
Yeah. So ours are oral capsules.
oral Okay, so it comes in little capsules.
Yeah. You take one a day and you poop better. Maybe. Hopefully.
All right. I know a few people who could use that. Yeah. Does it pair well with fluorosophy?
Yes, it does.
We talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
As a prebiotic.
Intriguing.
Yeah, because you really want both. And, you know, I guess the microbiome philosophy around all of this is that it's a complex ecosystem. So you need the precursors, you need the fiber, and you need the end products, especially if you're missing keystone species in between. But things can adapt.
And I also will say for Thaena, where I've had a handful of my patients really respond well, are the ones that are resistant to everything else in the gut symptoms. You know, it's like we have done all the logical things that I would do with most people and they would have success. And they have to have that postbiotic to move the needle.
And sometimes the postbiotic will help move the needle to then reintroduce the fiber. Because we all do need more fiber. Like if we could have the same infatuation with fiber as we did with protein.
I say this all the time.
We would
Andrea.
be in a really not as bad of a place. But the reality is if you're missing those keystone species ecosystem for the fiber, you feel crappier. And so you have to find a way to nurture that ecosystem back. Ecosystem activism.
Yes.
You know, is that we in a place to do that is with postbiotics, a place to do that is with you know, all the other things in lifestyle and nutrition that don't directly, you know, bring a bunch of fiber to somebody right away until they're ready.
You're really a pioneer. And I know that this is going to be one of those situations where in 20 years and 30 years, so many providers are looking back like, man, we were really missing the boat. And you're bringing it to us. And I know there's so much to learn and there's going to be so much research and so many more things need to be discovered. But it's just so cool that you have discovered this and created and brought to the world this really amazing product.
I did not know putting the poop in the autoclave would work. I didn't know.
Curiosity,
I just
right there.
thought maybe it was worth a try. I'll be very honest.
What
That's
if we
classic.
just autoclave some poop?
Yeah,
and
you know,
see
we have
what
an
happens?
autoclave at the office. Hey.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So I appreciate that. And I do think we all are like gonna go back and revisit the logical. It's like my mom is one of those beautiful old hippie ladies and you're just like, she sounded so crazy when I was 7.
Yes.
But man, did she know what she was talking about.
Yes. It takes a while for science to catch up with really brilliant ideas, as we know. That is the trend in science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we always like to end, Andrea, by asking our guest, what does whole health mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, it's about having an appreciation for all the ecosystems that are living in and on us. And so whole health for me in particular is knowing that I have an ally in my microbiome and my body and its health is dependent and intertwined and supported by the health of my microbiome. And so a healthy microbiome for me means a healthy rest of me.
That is so cool. I love that. An ally.
And where can people find you?
On the internet.
What is your website?
Thaena.com, spelled Thaena, because Greek
Yes.
microbes.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Thank you so much for being here. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope that you will be excited about the mouth microbiome more in the future.
So excited. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Whole Health Podcast.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, please follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can find out more about us at thewholehealthpodcast.com.
You can find me on my website, blodgettdentalcare.com.
And you can find me at bioloungepdx.com or learn more about my organic soluble fiber supplement, Fluorosophy, at thinkfluorosophy.com.
We look forward to seeing you next time.